quiet. I'm not sure why it's so quiet. I guess I can boost it. I have a feeling it's not as quiet as it seems. Well, the gain's way down. When did that happen? Is that better or worse? Is this higher or lower? I think that's good. I think I turned the gain down at some point. That's fine. Tell me if my mic voice is a little bit odd. I can't hear it until after the fact, so that's not very helpful. But now that we're streaming, I will tell the world. Oops, I closed and accidentally started this. That's good. It's not going to autoplay any videos. Streaming. That's not how you spell streaming. Streaming. Game dev. Making boss room stuff. And again. Alright. Last Wednesday I missed it because I was working too hard. Today I didn't miss it, although I still had to work hard. It happens. Where we are is we spent Saturday connecting up the tunnels and making sure that these rooms were the right scale and scope to have tunnels connected to them. So these rooms are now fully linked up to each other, with the exception of this one room here. I guess this one's actually also already linked up. So all the links are in place, but the rooms still need quite a bit of polish in order to feel right. So I thought what I'd do today is focus on the first half, the entrance into the boss. And that way we'll be able to have polish on the elements that need polish, so that we will be able to see how it looks. And then we'll be able to arrange the boss exit, knowing that the boss entrance is, set up correctly. Anyway, we'll rotate this. Doop, doop, doop. I really have no idea how much rotating is. I'm not going to rotate it after all. We'll leave it like this. It's fine. Basically, we want to start just outside of this main room, and then we'll hit play and see how it looks. Now, I've turned off the outer hull, so we won't be able to see the outer hull at all. But I want to be able to go into this room here and see how this looks and feel my way through. So normally this would be the entrance. You can't see it because I've got it turned off. I'll turn it back on someday. And then you enter into this room here, and it's a giant hollow area with some debris and some stuff, and it should look fun. And the idea is that you'll move down in this direction and find the exit. You can see that the exit is the only thing over here that's got any light in it. I think we'll probably polish that a little bit more. And then when we come in here, we enter into this corridor. And the idea being that this corridor should be a little bit challenging to come in through, but not so challenging to leave once we're done. And I might have them backwards or something. We'll figure that out later. But you can see how the corridor doesn't really have any decorations. It's just like a video game corridor from the 70s. And because of that, I think it's necessary for us to add in some decorations and stuff. That's what we'll do today. We'll probably focus mostly on the corridors. And then we enter into this room here, and it is an area where we're hopefully being guided through, such that we understand that we need to cross over into onto the other side of the room. And it's hard to tell, so maybe I'll clean that up a little bit, but maybe I'll wait until some other day. I have to make these interior shots better too. And maybe clean up the collider for this object, since I should be able to walk straight through it, and I can't. Well, clearly the interior of this tunnel needs work, but since I threw it together and then the blender crashed, I think I'll be able to do it at some point here. But I think I don't have any clue where I'm supposed to go here. I got turned around, which is a bad sign. So this is a badly designed room, and I'll need to polish it up. But for right now, I think I will focus. I'm almost sure I just went the wrong way. No, I went the right way. I just went up instead of down. But I think today we'll focus on hallways. And the ways I plan to polish up the hallway... Oh, Erdroy came in. Hello, Erdroy. The way I plan to polish the hallways is to add in a combination of debris particles and decorations. It looks like I have the boss set to trigger. That was probably what the problem was. Since the boss is triggering, a whole bunch of stuff has changed around, and maybe that's why I was having such a hard time figuring out what the heck was going on. Let's go ahead and turn the boss off. Should be here, right? Boss. So we're going to turn off the debug. That way it won't automatically fire, and we should have an easier time of things. Now, I don't want to keep moving through this room every single time I want to test stuff, so we're going to go ahead and start the player kind of in the middle near the exit, just so that we can get a good fast start into the tunnel, which is what we're really working on today. And you can see how now we're floating pretty near to direct above the tunnel. And that should be much better. So let's go ahead and take a look and then see whether or not that cleaned up the reactor room a little bit. I keep calling it a reactor room. It's not. It's an arbitrary turbine room. I call it a turbine room from now on if I can remember. And I'm coming at this at full speed, which is probably not a wise idea. Yeah, it's gonna get you bouncing off the walls. So I'm gonna fill this tunnel up with decoration. I have to think about what kind of decorations I want. And then we come into here, and this is the room that we're supposed to be able to know where to go. And it's just an S shape. It's not terribly complicated. But the problem is this, right here. When you pass over here, you're not going to immediately notice that there's anything behind you, and you're going to come this way instead. So I'm going to have to tweak that at some point, because the whole point is that we need to come through this hole. It might be clearer if we come in from below or something. I'll have to just adjust it and make sure I know what's going on. And then this side is much clearer now that there's no longer a giant pane of debris in the way. And you can see that the exit is right here. And then we enter into an identical tunnel. So we're going to want to decorate these tunnels. Maybe I'll flip one of them around or something. Alright, so let's get to decorating. We got a couple of standard decoration elements. We've got the sparky pipes. We've got the debris elements. We've got the debris elements with a grid. And we even have some cute little decorative elements here that aren't technically separated from the object, but we could easily remake them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create some of these kinds of decorations for our tunnels. And that'll be a little bit better than just reusing the stock ones all the time. And we'll be able to use those decorations in other places. So let's go open up our meshes for the inner area of this. And this shouldn't, I don't think this includes the tunnels. I'll have to double check here. I was just kind of, no, this doesn't include the tunnels. We want the one with the tunnels, which I think is just the raw military scanner file. Yeah, that seems like tunnels. Yeah, there they are. See them in the middle there? Tunnels. So what we're going to do here is we're going to save this as detailing or something. Give me a moment. I forgot to set this up ahead of time. I'm going to switch you over to Phoenix Wright for a second while I make sure that this saves in the right place and doesn't get all screwed up. So this is military scanner detailing. There we go. There we are. All right, so the difference is that for the detailing file, we're only going to keep around a few of the things that we want and delete the rest, because there's no reason to have all of this stuff in what is just specifically for little detail piping and stuff like that. So here you can see the basic setup with the tunnels, and the way they work is it's a tunnel segment that gets repeated over and over and over, and then you just bind it to a curve. It's very simple. We're going to do the same thing now for another kind of object. First things first, let's move this to the side. Now we're going to go and start with a set of wiring pipes. Now these are a little bit difficult because wires can get, there's a balance between repetition and being too bland. So I could create just a wire that runs along the whole length of the corridor, right? So These are the corridors, and I could just have a wire that runs along their whole length. But the problem with that is that the wire would just be the thing that's always there, and there's not really any noticeable detailing. So what we really want to do is create a wiring kit that goes along the edges of this in an unusual and fun way. But when we do that, we need to be careful not to over detail the wires, because we don't need wires that are broken or sparking in some obvious way, because then when we repeat that later on in a different part of the tunnel, it's going to be obvious that it's the same wiring mesh. So we need our wires to be fairly generic while also remaining unique when deployed. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to focus mostly on how the wires move rather than on things like damage to the wires. And because of that, we'll be able to just rotate it or scale it, and it should remain fairly good. So when we're creating wires, I think what we'll do is we will start with a box. And there we are. And we'll need some kind of wiring box for our wires to come out of that we can just attach arbitrarily to the edge of a tunnel. And so this is something where it should look decent, even if it's a little bit off-centered or repeating. So we're just going to go and bevel this a little bit. And that's going to be the top of our wiring kit. And then we're going to cut here. And we'll create just a little inset. And that's going to be where our wires come out of. And for now, we're just going to set that aside, by which I mean leave it right there. And we're going to start with another cube. And this is going to be our wiring section. This is going to be the actual wiring part. And it's not in the middle. So delete it. Start again. There we are. Now I created that starter kit just so that I would have something to compare these wires to. The idea here is that we are going to want to fit these wires into that slot. So what we'll do is we'll just move this down until it's in the right spot, like there-ish, right? Yeah. Now we'll know roughly how big the wiring should be. And that will allow us to create a lot of wires without needing to worry too much. Anyway, I just want it to be... we'll move it manually. Yoink. Perfect. And this is going to be a nice long segment, just like that, perhaps. And the problem is that this is not really 0 to 1. So we're going to start over. I screwed that up. Sorry. What we would like is just one that's got a really even setup. That's just like 0 to 1. So what we're going to do is move these like that. And then we're going to scale it down on the other axes until it's correct. Because the length needs to be correct, and the rest is pretty excusable. There we are. That's basically right. Now this is a segment, but it's not actually a wire. So the question is, how do you create wires with a segment like this? And the answer is basically that you just cut it into strips and make strips of wire. And then you can make each strip of wire a little bit interesting, and it'll give you kind of a band of wires. There are a lot of other ways to do it that are more elegant, but this way is cheap and easy. So that's what we're going to do. And basically, we're just going to grab a segment of it and then duplicate it a couple of times. Like that. And then we'll make one of these wires bigger. Like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to make these wires various colors, but we also have to add in a little bit of topological interest. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. One of the ways I could do it is I could create the wire as just its own thing and then, skin a a curve. But the problem with that is I'd have to create lots of curves and band them together and then apply those curves on top of another curve. And frankly, I think it's probably easier to just do it manually for the moment. So that's what we'll do. So to make interesting shapes out of this, we'll choose some of these wires to have some interesting details that aren't really wiry like this. And then what we'll do is we will cut this wire up. Hold on, I screwed this up because all of these wires actually need to be cut up, and I should have done that before duplicating them. That was dumb. Okay, so what we're going to do is, rather than cut up all of these wires manually, we are going to bring this back down, and then we're going to apply an array modifier. Like that. And then we're just going to hit apply, and we're going to go in, and we can remove doubles, and that'll remove interior faces, I think. Nope, all of the interior faces are still there. Great. So we're going to undo that. And we're going to remove the faces. I can barely see because the sun has decided to just come in through my window. I should really change the time I'm streaming when it's summer, because this is almost impossible to see. I mean, either that or I could change the settings in Blender, but come on, that sounds like work. There we are. So this is our wire setup, and what we're going to do is within these segments, we can be as creative as we want with what these wires need to be. So we're going to just grab one of these and then expand it, but not on the y-axis, like this. And then what we can do is move the whole thing over like so. Now, although these bends do have to be in that right spot to keep the whole thing flowing along the greater curve, we can add in additional cuts whenever we need if we want to have something a little bit more interesting. Now, in this case, I think what we'll do is just move them in so that it feels like it's a slightly more organic curve on this side. Yeah, like that. Yeah, there we are. So now we've got a little like box, right? And we're also going to want to put in a just some kind of catch. So we'll grab this, duplicate it, and then extrude it forward like this, and then select the whole thing and scale it up. We're going to want to invert the shading here and move it so that it is in the right spot. And this will just be something that binds our wires into place. And in order to do this, we're going to want this to be on one of these segments so that when we adjust the segments, we can do it without any fear of disrupting the overall flow. So we can do it like this, for example. And then to handle that, we'll just pull it out. And then we can soften this by simply grabbing these two elements and beveling them. And that'll create a slightly softer edge. We could bevel here, but I don't want to because it creates a blur across the edge of a segment. And the segments, I can't see what's going on there. And the segments are inviolate if we want them to flow correctly. So there we go. We've got that set up. And now you can see that this segment, this pin that we've put in here is just a little bit too small for comfort. So we're going to make it a little bit bigger. And then we will pull this guy in the same way. So we'll just scale that up, and then we will bevel. And then we will add in just a little bit of a gentle element to curve them. There we go. More or less. And that should give it a repeating feel. But hopefully it won't be so pronounced that the wires feel strange. Now, in the past, we've also done wires that cross over each other and stuff, but to be honest, I think this is probably fine as long as we choose our materials. Now, one of the things we can do is we could use colors and use a vertex color shader. But we don't happen to have those right now, and I don't feel like making them. So we're just going to go with some random things and set it up. So by default, these are all hull, right? And that's more or less fine, but we're going to want to be a little bit more careful to make some of them more interesting than others. And to do that, we'll just select several of these, like this, and set them up as machinery. And then this one, that'll be the glow. And these aren't going to be machinery and glow in the game. They're going to be arbitrary colors that we choose. And then we'll set this one up here as glow, and then we will set up this circuit box as glow. And that should be all we need to do to have a set of cables that looks decent. Now the next step is to name it cables, and then duplicate it. Boom! We're going to send the original off to the side for a bit and create a curve here in the middle. And this curve, I guess a Bezier curve is fine, will just be our the shape that we want our wires to go in. So that should be fairly straightforward. And what we can do is make this as big or as small as we want. There's no particular reason to worry about that too much. And over here on this, we'll create some array modifier. That's a bevel. An array modifier where we tell it to fit a curve. This one. And you can see that it didn't like that. So we'll just switch it here. And there we go. Now we're fitting the curve in terms of length. And now all we need to do is fit the curve in terms of everything else. So, there we are. Oh, it went the wrong way. There we go. Is that correct? That's correct, but it's rotated 90 degrees. Well, I guess that's as good as it's going to get. If I wanted to, I could come in here and rotate it around the y-axis by 90 degrees. And that'll get it to be flat. Unfortunately, there doesn't appear to be any way to have it... oh, maybe negative y would have worked, but it would have gone the wrong way. There doesn't appear to be any way to tell it to rotate it on another axis, so that's just something we have to live with. And I don't think you can tell because the curve is so gentle, but this is fitting the curve in question. And if we were to edit the curve in question, it would continue to fit. And that's kind of the point. So what we're going to do is set this up with a bit of a rotation, and then down it goes. And we're also going to put in just a bit of a wobble, not too much. There we are, like that. And that'll give us a curve, a conduit that has a curve. And now why would we want a conduit that has a curve like this? Well, this curve is a little bit too extreme. Let's go ahead and massage it a little bit. There we are. This curve is going to get put into these tunnels. So if we scale up the tunnel by like 5, I scaled up the tunnel. I actually need to scale up the Bezier curve. There we are. Nope. I have to do it with both, and I'm not going to bother. So basically, the point is that these wires can curve along this curved tunnel, but not in the exact same way that the tunnel does. So basically, they'll never be able to run the length of the tunnel. They're always going to be deviating from the standard tunnel. And then what you do is you use these boxes to catch them. So there's going to be a wire box. And it doesn't really, it's not part of the same object. So it can rotate independently of the object, and we can have fun with it like that. We'll just go ahead and add that as a hull. And then we'll save this whole thing and go over into Unity and just see how it works when we try and put it in. So here's a tunnel. And if we are going to go to this tunnel here, we can, this is the whole thing, and then here, I think it's made out of several different tunnel segments. Yeah, that's fine. What we're going to want to do is add in a new element, a 3D object cube, for example. We don't need this box collider. In fact, this is going to be a collider-less cube, but we're going to want to have a wire box, which we'll put here. And then we're going to also want to have cables. So I think I called them cables rather than wires. Yeah, this one. And you can see how it doesn't have the right materials, so it's got some weirdity happening, but that's fine. We can give it the right materials, so we'll do that right now. What we're going to want is Prox Hull, or no, Prox Hull is something else we used a lot, so Prox Highlight. That one's probably a little bit too much. Prox Interior, there we are. Prox Machinery, and then maybe something like Orange. Orange is in the wrong spot, so let's change them out. Let's make this one Prox Machinery, and let's make this one Orange. That's better. And now what we can do is we can actually stick these cables. That's not how you spell cable. This is going to be a cable box. Duplicate this cable box and put one inside the other, and then put the cable inside. And then what we can do is we can just rotate this entire thing around its pivot. And that will allow us to set this up however we want. One thing worth noting is it's way, way too big. So we're going to bring it down to like 0.2. That's better. And what we'll do is we'll just play around with it and see whether or not we can get it to curve in the way that makes this feel correct. And if we can't, we'll just adjust it. So right now, this is the right kind of curve, but the box is upside down. We'll deal with that later. So what we'll do is we will move this and see how it lines up. And you can see that it's still too big. So we'll bring it down to 0.15. There we go. And at 0.15, if we run it along the top here, and then we can just bring it down, you can see how this is intended to work. These sorts of wires, it looks like the curve at the end is too extreme. It might work better on the other side of the setup, like here. Oh, there we go. Just move it. Don't rotate it at all. Here we are. So if we look at it here, then we've got this long segment that curves around and then bumps into the wall. And we can adjust exactly how much that curves around and exactly how much that bumps into the wall just manually as we see fit. We can scale it, we can move it, we can do anything we want with it because it's our device. But once we have it in the place we want it, we can take this other cable box, flip it 180, and move it to the right spot to catch the wire so that it doesn't feel like it's just wandering into the wall. Now, ideally, we would have a way to do this that doesn't require us to manually move stuff, but you take what you can get. We actually do have a way to do that, now that I'm thinking about it. We can just hold V and snap it, and that'll bring it pretty close to where we need it to be. And then we can just do the rest of it by eyeballing it. There you go. And so you can see that these boxes have the wrong material. What does this have as material? Prox Interior Textured. Well, this doesn't have a texture, so Prox Interior Texture would be a waste. But it's so much darker than the rest of the Prox Hull, because it's not Prox Interior, it's Prox Hull. So let's go ahead and select it and make it Prox Interior. And that means that the cable should have Prox Hull instead of Prox Interior. Doop. There we go. And then this, we can just move it back a touch because there is a little bit of wire showing from the back side, and then don't want that. There we go. So now it is a quote-unquote seamless set of wires and cable boxes. The only issue here is that the cable box is truly, truly terrible, but that's not too bad because when we fix it, it'll automatically get fixed here in this as well. So that's what we'll do right now, I suppose. Let's Also consider adding in colliders to those cable boxes. Just some square box colliders. The cables don't need any, but I think the box colliders would work well for the boxes. So let's go over into, first we'll go here and delete this, or rather close this, we don't need it. And then we'll go here and we will work on this to make these boxes look a little bit less crap. I think the easiest way to do that is going to be to extrude from here like this, and that'll just give us a little bit of a lip. And then we can adjust that lip so that it feels natural inside of the wall. But the key here is that we need it to feel natural regardless of where the wall falls along this span. So if the wall is here, it still needs to feel natural. And therefore, what we're going to do is create some vertical like pump elements, or vertical, that's the wrong number of cuts. There we are. There we are. And what we'll do is we'll just grab here, here, here. Oh, it's the wrong number of cuts. I am really bad at this. That's 7. We want 6. Here, here, and here. There we go. Better. And we'll just expand or extend like this and pull it out like that. And then what we can do is make these into a nice vertical element. And the way we're going to do that is by bonding some of these elements together. And I think the easiest way to do that is to just do merge at last a whole bunch. There are better ways to do this, but the only problem is that you can see how they skew. So after all, we're not quite ready for that. We are going to have to straighten all of these out. What a pain. Okay, so we're going to change our mind and not do it that way. We are going to cut here and then delete half. There we go. And then we'll add in a mirror operator. But then what we're going to do is grab this entire segment and we're just going to build them as separate elements rather than attempting to build them into the same topology. And that'll be a little bit easier for us. So just extrude and then down and then pull this element out. And then I guess we should flatten here and then grab this and pull it down. And then in. And that's a very, very basic sort of device, but it's going to be fairly convincing at making it so that this feels like it's properly connecting to the surface, regardless of how deeply we embed it. But there are a couple more details that we would like to put in to make it feel a little bit more interesting. And one of those is going to be this. We just want a little detail near the back. Something like that is fine. And that should be enough to make this interesting enough to use. We're going to go ahead and use 2 different materials, hull and heavy hull. And we're going to use this mostly because the lighting is going to be pretty bad, and we don't want to rely on it to make this seem like it's, hollow or has pits in it. We're going to manually assign them. And we're also going to go ahead and, well, I think that this should be heavy hull, but that's it. I think the rest is fine as is. And then we're going to unwrap the whole thing. No, that's the browser. That's this. All right. Half of it's going to be wrong because we don't have the right materials on our renderer, but we can just increase this to 2 to get them. And we'll drop in the Prox machinery as a second material, and there we go. And you can see how it feels relatively anchored. But how does it feel over here on the weird one? It's in a random spot. Well, in actual fact, it's not too bad, but I think that we're going to want to get rid of this black band because it makes it too distinct. It's like once you see that black band, you feel like that's what you should be seeing every time. And when it's not there, it makes the model look wrong. So when we get rid of the black band, then this little wart looks fine. If we wanted to, we could change this over into interior textured, and that would make it fit in a little bit better, I suppose. Yeah, that's not too bad. The interior texture is a little bit strange for this one because of the way that this set of hex marks works. So to fix that, we're just going to change the texturing. There we are. And you can see that this is where the texturing is right now. We're just going to move the whole thing and go back over, and it should reload and look different. There we are. That's a little bit better for our needs, and that's fine. So I am fine with this. And what we're going to do is just add a couple of these to various places in our tunnels, just to make them feel alive, you know? So we can take this tunnel box, this cable box, and we can duplicate it and put it anywhere we want. But before we do too much, let's go ahead and make sure that it feels right when we see it in person. Unfortunately, it's on the far side of this labyrinth, so it'll take a couple of seconds to get there. But it's good to familiarize yourself with the process enough that you feel annoyed by your terrible choices, terrible game design choices. The camera is drifting through the walls because it's not really built for this. I might fix that or I might not. I don't really know yet. I'll have to think about it. Yeah, this beam in the way is definitely what's causing us most of our issues because we're going to go up over it a lot of the time. I think that if we go down under it, it'll feel better, so I might block the top path. Either way, this part should be pretty straightforward because you can see this glowing yellow immediately when you come out. We're almost at the part that we just edited. It's at the end of this tunnel. So let's go ahead and see how it looks when we get there. Ah. Bonk. There we are. So you can see how that looks. It's large enough that the player ship really does feel like it is. It feels like it's actual serious size. It's not as small as it looks here in the editor because the player ship is so big or small. So this is about right. It looks more or less how I want it to look. However, we want to make sure that we place it in places the player is unlikely to run into. Just because if they slam into it, then it'll end up being really unconvincing because they fly through the cables without really any sort of distortion. The cables don't know that they've been hit. And we're not going to sit here and add in cable physics. It's not really much point. So we're just going to put it in places where the player is unlikely to collide, and that means on the inside of most curves, which is why I shaped it like that. But we're going to also stick this in as a prefab. Excuse me. Now, the problem with the prefab is, of course, that if I'm a little bit careless, I can accidentally change all of them when I just want to move the box around a little bit. So we're going to have to be careful about that, but it shouldn't be too bad. Here we've got this other side. This is the entrance, and I think that we're going to want to start putting them on the roof of the entrance right there. So let's drag one in and put it in the right spot. Mm-hmm. This feels strange. Did I do this wrong? Oh, no. It's just that there's crap in the way, so I couldn't see it. So here what we've got is an attempt to do the same basic thing, but you can see how high this trajectory is. So we're going to want to, rotate the whole thing down. And basically, we want to rotate it down until it is as close to the wall as possible without actually clipping through the wall. See how it clips through? That's no good. There we are. It still clips through, but it's extremely close to working. So what I'm going to do is just push it like an inch forward here. We'll rotate it a little bit, and then just glide forward a touch, and then we'll see how it looks. I guess it probably needs like 1 more degree. There we are, like that. That's more or less how I want it to feel. Let's go ahead and take a look. This one is at the beginning, so we don't have to wander through corridors and corridors and corridors. And you can see that we don't have any problem seeing it right away. There it is, just kind of gliding along the inside curve. Now, it's possible for you to hit this, but your natural tendency when flying is going to be to drift towards the outside. The only question is whether or not we want to adjust it so that it's even less likely. And the way we'll do that is by putting that loop that curls around here. If we put that over right here at the very edge so that it just barely curls around the edge without clipping. You can see how that clips just a tiny, tiny fraction. That much is fine. It looks like it's on purpose. And you can see how that's much, much closer to the edge of the tunnel, which means you're not likely to want to go into it unless you decide that you really want to. And we could add in a collider on these cables. It's not that hard, but it doesn't make any sense that the cables would be stiff, you know? That's kind of the whole point. But what we'll do now is add in another one. So this is the cable box that we're at, and this is a segmented tunnel system. So we can add in cable boxes for any of the tunnels that we want to add in, right? So we'll just go ahead and duplicate this cable box and stick it in a different tunnel. And move it to 0, 0, 0 and arrange it so that it feels right in whatever tunnel we happen to have landed in. And in this case, it's a straight segment tunnel. So we can put this wherever we want to make it feel like it is softening this really, really sharp crease between the tunnel elements. So I rotated it because I thought I had to, but I didn't. There was no reason to rotate it. So if we put this right on top of the curve, we can break that curve up a little bit so that it should feel a little bit less aggressive. At least that's the hope. And you can see how this has got a really aggressive trend downwards. It just loops down. And there's no loop here. This is not a curved segment, not a very aggressively curved segment. So the question is, how can you get this to work when there's such an aggressive curve? And the answer is, you can't, but we built it like that on purpose. So we'll put this in, and then we'll go over to the other end of the cable box, and we'll just move this guy so that he's in the right spot. That's the whole point. Click. There. And then we'll just rotate and smooth it until it is feeling good. Okay, so there's a little bit of There we are. So this is what I call truly slapdash level design. When you are just throwing in decorations after the fact, there's really only so much you can do, and that's fine. I don't really feel the urge to go in and white box the whole thing. This is a game that is very much a good enough thing, where it's like, whatever. So I'm fine with having things be a little bit rough. But I do want the things to be engaging. So here you can see that it's another cable, and then as you're following it along, there is this horrible bump. What we really want to do is make sure that that bump has some cable going along it so that you know it's going to happen, or so that you can feel it's going to happen. I think that that is in tunnel entrance 2. Yeah. So we'll duplicate this cable box, put it in tunnel entrance 2, and move it until it is in the right place to do the work we need it to do. And that is to loop around this inside curve, which means that we're going to actually start it here at the back end. just because the strong curve element is on the far side. So if we start it over here, we'll have a curve that gets sharp at the end, and we won't have to worry about trying to figure out how to make it get sharp. But the problem is that this tunnel is not long enough to really reach the end of the curve. You can see how the curve over there is just too far away. And so we're probably going to want to reduce the size of the cables, which is not bad. We can just grab it and scale it down on the y-axis like that. And the problem here is that it is not actually in the spot where it'll be visible to the player. So we're going to want to move it until the pillbox that we use to contain it is just poking out. And so now let's move that pillbox. It's obviously in completely the wrong spot. Not a big deal. We'll just snap it and rotate it and move it into place. I'm not actually sure that that'll be visible. See how far back on the curve it is? Maybe it would be better to do it a different way. Let's go ahead and revert that change. There we are. And instead, we're going to start it on the far edge and loop around the ceiling. Basically, we want the player to realize that there is quite a sharp turn coming up. And I think that the only way we're going to do that is if this cable obviously has to contrast with the curve that's happening. And unfortunately, I don't really know the best way to do that with the shape we've created. We can kind of follow the curve, but you can see how it flies up. And maybe the answer is simply to run it along the floor so that it's clearly not doing the same thing that the rest of the tunnel is doing, with the idea being that the player will notice that there is something that isn't quite right. If we bring it forward and then turn it, we can have it go around the curve like that. And then, of course, we move the other half into position along the curve so that it seems to be containing it. Yoink. Oh, that's far too far forward. Try again. Oh, come on. Pick a curve. Thank you. There's some stuff in the background that I can't see that keeps getting in the way. Erdoi says, you need some spline-based editor plugin for this. Well, yeah, except that would create a lot of custom meshes, and that would be a lot of optimization that I'd have to take care of. Every time I create a new set of meshes, it's a new load that I have to transmit to the GPU. Whereas if I reuse the same meshes a lot, I've already got the optimizations in place to automatically have that only take one GPU message. Of course, I suppose if they're being what do you call it? I suppose if they are being optimized away, it's probably not as big a deal. But you're right. If I had an in-game spline editor, I could do this much faster. I don't want to do it with an in-game spline editor, though. Even if I had one, I would feel like that would be suboptimal. But that might just be me making shit up. Erdway says, static batching applies to this if meshes share the same material. Right now I'm using GPU instancing, and that's for these as well. So I'm not sure what the difference would be in terms of performance. I think it would be fun to find out, but I don't have any spline editor for this. I could create one. It wouldn't be that hard for me to create a... Oop. No, I didn't see it at all. It wouldn't be hard for me to create a system where it just takes the mesh and staples it to the walls. But the problem is that currently I don't have anything like that anymore. I used to, but I wrote it out of the project because it was unnecessary. I don't think I want to extend the project anymore to do it. I'm not against it. I don't think that it's worth the amount of time it would take to create it. Anyway, one more thing we're going to need is the particle cannon. So let's go ahead and grab one of these debris fillers and drop it right into that same tunnel entrance. And for some reason it starts in the middle of nowhere. Here we are. So the debris filler is a... This is not what I thought it was. Okay, so I actually don't think this is what I want. This is probably it. Here it is. This is what I want. So you can see that this debris caster is going to cast a debris in whatever volume I tell it. And right now the volume I'm telling it is extremely large. We can bring down the scale or we can bring down the volume. Either one would work. Either way, if we go on over to it, which I believe is F, yeah, we can set it up to project into this loop. So that the bottom of the loop will fill with junk. And there's something a little screwy with the boxes. Oh, no, there's not. I'm just an idiot. There we go. So this is obviously extremely unusually scaled for the sort of thing we normally do. So we're going to have to test it and make sure that it actually looks like we want it to look, because it might very well end up seeming very silly. But what we'll do is we will move it into the edge here and have it push that way. And I think what that'll do is create a cloud of debris right here. Let's go ahead and take a quick little look and see how that seems. One of the issues is that might not work. I don't know whether or not I have a debris. See how it says mesh sets 0? That's obviously not going to work. This is interesting. You know, it might be better for me to steal one. So here's a debris caster. You can see how it's got debris in Proc's hull. We're going to go ahead and do that same thing here. And that should be okay, except I don't believe that there is a renderer for this object. In order for the debris caster to work, I believe it needs to be part of a system so that I can optimize it. I put in a lot of automatic optimizations, and I don't believe that this will even show up, because nothing is calling the mesh instanced thing. But we'll see. See anything. Oh wait, there it is. Okay, so it has part of itself here. Crash. That might not be exactly how I want it, but it's getting a little bit closer. It's clear that these are a little too big, so we'll bring it down to 0.02 and 0.08. And I think that what we'll do is pull this back even further and hit play again. Basically, the idea is the player should see that there is a giant cloud of debris and know that there's something wrong, that he's going to want to stop and change his direction. See, if you're moving slowly, it's pretty obvious. But when you're moving fast, it's hard to see, which is fine on the way in. The question is, how does it feel on the way out? So we're going to go and move into this room, and then pull a Yui. So when we're trying to leave, we see the debris, and it really does help us, at least I think, to understand that there is a lot of chaos ahead. We'll see. It might be that they're still too big. Let's try them even smaller. Erdway wrote a paragraph. Yeah, he's talking about what instancing is and stuff like that. Yep. I know most of this stuff because I've done it, but obviously people who approach it in different ways have different results and different priorities, and that's fine. Every game should be different, or things would get very boring. But the whole point of this game was to draw debris, and that means drawing the same mesh over and over and over. And that's what I built this game to be good at. So drawing different meshes, even if they're static, is just something that this doesn't really know how to do very well. And that's fine. That's not what it's built to do. There we are. That's actually a little bit better. Now I can see the curve without it being blocked off by debris. Yeah, that feels pretty nice. Plonk. All right. Fun in the sun. With that said, this is basically the exact same tunnel that we used down below, except for this one down here has a slightly different arrangement, and it also has some boss elements. I think it might be easier to duplicate the stuff that we're doing up here instead of attempting to duplicate the entire thing and move it around, because I don't want them to feel too similar. But what we will do is go down into this other tunnel here, find the curved one. It's this, good. And we'll paste this debris caster in. And do the exact same thing we did upstairs. Oh, that's not what I want. Yoink. 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 There we go. There we are. That should have a very similar result to what we just did, except that it's at a different place and a different kind of result, meaning that it should feel a little bit more interesting. The cable box that we've got here is fine, but let's go ahead and add in another one, which will also be in the same corridor, because this corridor is the one that needs the help. And you can see that this is rotated upside down from what I thought it was, which is not necessarily bad, but I think that we'll want to rotate it like this so that it can go around this curve. And once again, the inside of the curve is where we want our stuff to be. And you can see how it's not moving around the curve at quite the right angle, and that's fine. We can just move this until it is. Perfect. There we are. Come on, Unity. Stop being a jerk. The handle, Unity doing stuff is a little bit weird when your camera is upside down. It's really goofy. It's really intended for you to edit right side up all the time. And that's just something we're not doing right now. All right, so this one actually goes all the way to the end of the cable. We'll just go ahead and move this so that it is also going all the way to the end of the cable. And that should be relatively okay. I don't see any real problems with that. We should then see the debris. Let's give it one more run through and then we'll be done for the day. This is your last chance to ask questions today. And then I won't be able to answer them again until Saturday. I'm hoping to have this version out by the end of August. And that'll include the full boss battle, including all the wind state and all that stuff. And that should be fun. But first, I've got to make sure that it's just not the worst thing ever to play through. And, you know, the piloting in this game, I was trying something out, and I think that a lot of people don't like it, which, I mean, that's not to say it's a complete flop. I think that this piloting method has promise. I think that I just need to polish it, but this isn't the game to do that. So I think this game is going to have really wonky piloting. And that's just going to be the way it works. Nothing else to it. I just really like the strafe-centric piloting idea and the way that you can have these guidance cones, and they let you move the mouse independently of how fast your ship can actually turn. Those two things combined seem like they would make a really excellent piloting encounter, piloting situation, but it sort of seems like they don't, at least not in the way I have implemented them. So we'll have to figure that out. Another thing we're going to figure out is that flat spot. So as we were coasting through, we ran into a really nasty flat spot, and I think it was probably here. And we're going to want that flat spot to not be there. So we're going to grab one of these bad boys, duplicate it, move it up into the tunnel entrance, and then move this into the right spot. But I believe that this definitely doesn't have the correct display mechanisms. So this is going to be something which does need to be adjusted. Where is it? Oh, of course, I was looking at the wrong tunnels. My bad. This is something that's definitely going to have to be adjusted so that it... Sorry, I'm looking around here trying to get this to work. Here it is. This is the flat spot. Right there. Anyway, there's no way to render this. It doesn't come with a renderer, so I need to add a renderer in so that it properly renders. Well, that's not quite right, is it? Too many zeros. There we are. So if we put this in on the flat surfaces, we can make it a little bit more interesting to navigate through. And I believe the flat surface in question is right there. So let's move it over and create a nice panel depositor guide. Yoink. And what we'll do is we'll just make it really quite a bit longer, like that. And if we rotate it correctly, we'll get a nice result. Boom. And now there's no renderer for this, so when we actually press play, we're not going to end up getting a nice renderer. This panel depositor doesn't actually do any of the rendering itself. So in order to make this work, we're going to have to use a renderer for it. But this renderer here is basically what we need. It's just that it's not on the right thing. So if we take a look at another room that has debris renderers that are, in use here, this is the debris grid injector, and here's the hull plate. The hull plate doesn't have it. It must be the entrance itself. Here it is. So we'll just copy this component, and we will paste it in on the tunnel entrance here. Let's put it here. And then let's move this up so that we don't lose it later on when we're looking for it. There we go. And that should be fine. Let's hit save and just take a look and make sure that we can see it. And then we'll be done. Now next time I'll probably decorate the tunnels a little bit more. I think that these decorations are not quite enough to break up the line of the tunnels. But I wanted to get the most annoyingly complicated and new decoration out of the way first, and that would be these wires. These wires are the thing I had to create and carefully craft. The rest is going to be just half-assed stuff where I reuse this kind of stuff that I've already got, and it should be enough, I would hope. But if it's not enough, I'll create something else new. The key here is I have to keep it fairly light. If it gets too heavy and slows the machine down, then it's not doing its job correctly. All right, here we are. This is the tunnel where I added in the panel depositor. So we should notice it as soon as we come out of this debris field. It should just be there waiting for us. It should be right there. Is it not there? What the heck? Even if I can't see the panels, I should still be able to see the plating, because the plating is just a mesh. It's not. It should be right here. So there's the player's ship. Where did it go? That's a debris caster. Here's a debris grid injector. No, that's a different one. Where is the other debris grid injector? Where did it go? Did I somehow delete it? Did I put it on the wrong tunnel? I might have put it on the wrong tunnel. Yeah, okay. I put it on the tunnel leading in rather than the tunnel leading out. And when I added in the... Great. So I can't see it because I added it into the wrong tunnel. And I was wondering why nothing seemed to be working, and it's because I put it in the wrong tunnel. That's not too bad, though. We'll just go ahead and paste in a new component here, exactly as before. And we'll just take a quick little stroll through the first tunnel instead of the second tunnel, and see whether we can see it. Because I got everything backwards in my head, this is actually facing us rather than facing away from us, so we'll probably see the debris field before we get to the physical object. It's probably just around this upwards curl that we're going to see in a minute. Yeah, there it is. See it? We are now swimming in it. This is it. So it's largely indistinguishable from the other kind of debris, which is kind of what the point is. But let's see if we can track down the actual panel. Everything's dark and indistinct, but there it is. and you can see how it broadcasts stuff this way in a nice straight stream. So the first set we ran into was from this, and then the second set was the debris caster, the phantom debris caster that just fills the area with junk. So we see this, and then we see the junk. And I think that's fine. I'm going to have to do more work on this next time, Saturday. See you around. Thanks for stopping by.